There, Steve here again at Steve's Cafe, where I rant on political subjects. If you want to hear me talk about language learning, go to Lingo Steve. We do prepare transcripts of these talks, as the same is true of the talks I do on Lingo Steve, and they appear in Link, Lingq, which is my language learning website. And therefore, those of you who are not native speakers of English and who want to use these to work on your English, you can find these lessons at Link. We normally put also a link to this course in our language learning system. Now, I always appreciate it when people ask me to talk about something, because it means that there's people out there that want to get involved in this discussion. And today the discussion is the Brexit, the referendum in the UK on the subject of whether to stay in the European Union or leave the European Union, and my views on it. Okay. Now, as always, unfortunately, I like this to be sort of an informal conversation, so I don't have it all worked out ahead of time, so I might be rambling a bit. But basically, I think the idea of holding this referendum is ridiculous to start with, because there is so much in the way of incorrect information. The ability of the average voter to really understand the issues and the implications of leaving or staying, the difficulty is so great that they can't really make a meaningful vote. They will vote on their feelings. I like Europe, or I don't like Europe. We're going to be invaded by foreigners, or I like going to France to drink wine. The bulk of the people are going to react somewhat emotionally. I believe in indirect democracy, where you vote in people that you can vote out every 3, 4, 5 years, and then they, on your behalf, decide issues that are usually too complicated for the average citizen to decide on. In my view, there seem to be 3 issues for those people who favor leaving the European Union. One is immigration. The second is that we're spending all this money for another layer of bureaucracy, and they make rules that we have to follow, sort of the sovereignty argument. And I guess the cost, like sovereignty, and then economically, we'd be better off without them. We're spending all this money. So it seems to me that it's immigration, sovereignty, and economics. Now, with regard to immigration, even though a lot of the call them the yellow press in Britain, and Britain has more than its share of rags that prey on people's emotions, the Mirror, the Express, the Sun, etc. And they've been playing up this great fear about immigration. Now, immigration is an issue. It's a legitimate issue in all countries in the West. It's an issue in the United States. That's why Donald Trump pounds on that issue as much as he can. It's an issue in Canada. And we should be able to express our views as a society freely on this issue. But it is kind of useful to get the facts straight. So if you go to a website called migrationwatchuk.org, which is a serious website and a serious place to discuss immigration, and which is against the high levels of immigration in the UK, you'll find some interesting statistics. And there you're able to select different sources of immigration and produce graphs showing what's been happening. So it's interesting to note that the largest growth in immigration into the UK over the last 10 years has been from what they call the EU 14, which is the Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany. In other words, call it the traditional EU countries. Okay, the what they call EU 8, which is Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia, call it Eastern Europe. That immigration peaked around 2007 and has been in decline. And then there's been an increase in immigration from what they call Europe EU 2, which is Bulgaria and Romania. But all of this immigration from the EU is higher than the immigration from what they call non-EU sources, which peaked around 2003 and has been in decline since. So it's not as if there's a great horde of Muslims invading the UK, which is the impression that a lot of people like to create. Now, I think that my own view, insofar as Canada is concerned, on immigration is fine. You're not going to prevent people from moving. People have moved since the beginning of time. But if they come to my country, in my view, they should assimilate. They should become Brits. So we have a Muslim mayor of London. As far as I'm concerned, he's assimilated. We have a Muslim Ismaili mayor of Calgary. Good stuff. We have a Minister of Defense in Canada who still wears his turban, but he's served in the Canadian Army. He's essentially assimilated. So if people assimilate, that's good. If they bring sort of 8th century Islamic ideas and hang on to these and preach them to their children, that's bad. So that, to me, is the issue that should be addressed. How do we ensure either that people assimilate? How do we make it clear that people have a responsibility to assimilate if they come to a country? And stop, propagating the myth that we encourage everyone to come to our country and act exactly as they did at home, and isn't that wonderful? And the more diverse we are culturally, the better off we are. I don't buy that, okay? But these are things that can be debated. However, insofar as the question of leaving the European Union, I don't think either way it's going to have much impact on the non-EU immigration. As far as the EU immigration is concerned, when I was last in Britain, everywhere, and I had been studying Polish at the time, everywhere I went, I met Polish people in hotels, in restaurants, everywhere. And they were actually remarkably well assimilated, and they were hardworking, and they were well regarded by the average Brit. And their children probably assimilate. And it's not only the children of the Eastern European immigrants who will assimilate, but I have two grandchildren who live in the UK, and they go to school there. And when I see a picture of their class, it's like half people of Indian, like from India origin. Those people have assimilated. And so I don't really see a big problem. Besides which, the flow of the non-EU immigration is on the decline and is not affected, as far as I can understand, by membership in the European Union. However, if we look at the fundamental reason for the European Union, it began as as a result of the desire of particularly Schuman in France to make sure that Europe never again has a war like the two wars that we saw in the first half of the 20th century. And if we look today at what's happening, where Russia decided they were going to snatch back Crimea because they felt that somehow that was just, after all, it's fair, it should never have been taken away because we just think so we'll just do what we want. We have Hungary that's got claims on areas that are populated by Hungarian speakers in their neighboring countries. And we have many other opportunities for conflict within Europe. What if Spain decides that they're going to blockade Gibraltar now? After Britain leaves the European Union, they may in fact get support from other members in the European Union. What about, call it Alto Adige, South Tyrol? Those people, German speakers in northern Italy, never really wanted to be part of Italy in the first place. But Germany kept on, and Austria was on the losing side of the First World War, the losing side of the Second World War, so they stayed put. But from what I gather, a majority of those people would rather be part of Austria. So is it possible, having seen what's happening, say, between Russia and its neighbors, could that start happening between Hungary and Slovakia? Already now the government in Poland is more nationalistic. What if we get more nationalistic governments elsewhere? So we pull this piece out of the EU, which is Britain. Possibly Scotland then votes to secede from the United Kingdom. We say that Le Pen gets voted in France, and there are disputes. Then they become more nationalistic. There's lots of old disputes. After the Second World War, the Germans were unceremoniously booted out of Czechoslovakia and Poland, where they had lived for hundreds, if not 1,000 years. Are those now old nationalistic wounds going to be dug up? I see where Poland is now wanting to do an investigation into the crimes committed by Ukrainian nationalists in the Second World War, quite justifiably, but then the Ukrainians can point to crimes committed by Polish nationalists who were trying to suppress Ukrainian nationalism in the 20s. I mean, there is no end to this. So I think that the old expression, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't think that Britain being in the European Union suffers. Of all the problems that I see in Britain, poor education system, crummy housing, and call them these radical imams preaching to people who espouse an 8th century version of their religion. Those are real problems. I don't think the European Union is one of the big problems in the UK. However, I think that by starting to unravel the European Union, the UK is opening up the possibility for this whole virus of virulent nationalism, which has caused so much damage in Europe, to once again raise its ugly head. And I really don't see the benefit. I think a lot of the motivation behind those who want to leave is this traditional British bloody mindedness about foreigners and continentals, and somehow they think they're somehow better, and ha ha ha, and all of this kind of stuff, like we saw with the hooligans in France, who were only too delighted to say, oh, we're going to leave you guys, and you guys smell, and whatever and stuff. So there's a lot of this kind of traditional, call it British bloody mindedness, which is really not very attractive, because the fact of the matter is that Europe is such an interesting place with so many different national cultures and food, and in many ways a more interesting place than the British Isles. Beg your pardon. As much as I like going to the UK, I think UK as a part of Europe is a much more attractive place than a UK with just those kinds of people. So yeah, I think Cameron should never have called the referendum in the first place. I think that I hope that the Remain group wins, but I think it has damaged the image of the UK, just like the Trump candidacy has tremendously damaged the brand of the US as the world's only superpower. Is going to have basically a ridiculous buffoon as president. So the damage to some extent has been done. Now, if the UK votes to leave, I also don't think that in the short term it's an economic catastrophe. After all, Norway and Switzerland have arrangements with the European Union and to a large extent follow European Union rules, as I understand it, so Britain would probably end up doing much of the same. But to my mind, if they weren't going to stay in, why join in the first place? It's a bit like getting married. Like once you're married, you're married. Like I've been married for 47 or 48 years. I don't every year have a referendum with myself as to whether I'm going to stay in or get out and stuff like that. I just think it's a totally unnecessary, artificially created crisis which gives the sort of radical England first people an opportunity to vent, and I see no benefit to the UK in leaving the European Union. So there you have it, my views on that subject, a bit longer than normal. I look forward to all the normal criticisms. Bye for now.